The daily code snippet. So here is our code again. We are on our index page and we are in section 2 where we are adding the ARIA labels to the links for each work project. So the editing in this part of the code is actually quite extensive because of this section has a lot of content. And so we will be kind of speeding through adding these ARIA labels. And the purpose of the ARIA labels is to let an assistive device know where the link is taking the user when it is clicked, if they are unable to visualize the text on the screen. The editing process on section 2 takes approximately 14 minutes of this video, so feel free to skip ahead. And now we will be taking a look at section 1, which contains our OWL slider, to see what we can do to add the alt text to the images in the slider. But we also note that the image that is used on Firefox browsers, which sometimes is unable to load the slider, this image also needs alt text. So we're going to add the alt text appropriate for this image before moving on to the slider itself. And see where we can go to fix this code for accessibility issues. And we know that we have a JavaScript associated with the OWL carousel, and we also have cascading style sheets associated with the OWL carousel, and finally we have the code that we have in our index page that activates the slider. So we're just going to be kind of taking a look at, what code we have from this product and see where we would need to adjust it to help fix some of the accessibility issues. And first we're going to take a look at the JavaScript to see what's there. And after kind of skimming through this area, we start to realize that there's really nothing in this particular part of the code that will help us adjust the alt text. So we're just kind of going to go through the code, and then afterwards we will go view the cascading style sheets to see what we have over there. So looking through the CSS, we really only note information that relates to the styling, and there's nothing that we can use here with regards to fixing the issue. So we go back to our index page to look at the code that we added to randomize the slider images. And we're going to go through the JavaScript that we had added and edited. So we didn't actually use the JavaScript that came with the OWL slider. We actually modified it in order to add this randomizing feature that would basically not only add a slider to our page, but basically depending on when the person goes to our website, the set of slides will be randomized to 4 different groupings. And so we're looking at the code here, and it does look that this is the area where we can go to adjust the code so that we can add the alternative text. Now the issue is that since the code is randomizing, we want to make sure that the appropriate alt text is connected to the appropriate image. And we're going to have to create 4 sets of code again, just like we did for the images and the links. So what happens is that the var random number does some math to pick a random number. And depending on that number, which is an integer of 5, if it picks, for instance, the number 1, then all the images associated with 1, as well as the links associated with 1, and now the alt text associated with 1 will be the ones that display. So this is how the code works. And so what we're going to have to do is add 4 new variables. Similar to how we have images 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to add 4 variables for the alt text. And we're going to call our variable alt 1, 2, 3, 4. And for now, we're not going to put the actual alt text in. What we want to do is put some placeholder text in so that we can test this code to make sure it works before we go to the trouble of adding the actual alt text. So we're just going to put some placeholder text, and what we want to do so that we can place the right text with the right image is put alt text that we can kind of identify so that we can connect the appropriate image to the appropriate text with the appropriate link, because we want all of the things to go together properly. So for each of the alt variables, so for alt 1, we are including 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, and similar for alt 2, 3, and 4. And once we've added that, and so this is not HTML or CSS. I just want to clarify that this is actually JavaScript. So this is a little bit beyond the scope of the coding that we cover in this series of code, where we're focusing on HTML and CSS. JavaScript is added to add additional functionality, and it is its own language, and it would be the language that we would want to cover next, after fully explaining HTML and CSS. But in order to do certain functions on our website, we do need to use JavaScript. And so this is actually JavaScript code, and it has a different syntax for the way it's written. So once we add our variables, we need to then add the actual display of the text associated with that variable in our code. And so that's what this next section is. And we see that, what happens is we have HTML there, but periodically, whenever something is within the single quotes, that's when a JavaScript is being pulled in, and that's the text that our variable stands for. And so we're going to add the appropriate alt text, and there's a certain syntax we have to use to make sure it pulls it in correctly. And then now, after we do that, we want to test our code to make sure it works. And so we're going to go to our browser, and we're going to open up our website. And we see that, typically if you're adding alt text to an image, when you hover over it, you see that text as a tooltip. But because the links, the images themselves are links, you are instead getting the hand icon that indicates it's a link. So you're not going to see that tooltip. So for us to be able to see that the JavaScript is working, we're going to actually need to look at the development side of a browser. So we basically inspect our page, and it's going to bring up a code window, and we're going to go to the section that has the slider, and we're going to look to see whether our alt text is being displayed appropriately. So we're going to open up these windows. And when we initially did it, we didn't see the alt text coming up. And why is that? It's because a lot of times when you're changing code live like this, what happens is your browser will cache the site. So that means that in order to pull it up quickly the next time you want to visit the site, it's assuming that you visit the site and you might want to visit it again. It caches all the data of that site so that the next time you visit, it's faster to load. But what happens is if you actually make a change to your code, then it's going to pull that cached stored image rather than the new code. So you need to clear your cache and then reload the site in order to see what's going on. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then now when we go to the slider and we open our code window, we're going to be able to see that, yes, it is actually pulling in the alt text that we added. But what we're seeing is that based on the way we've numbered things, that the image marker, where you see the way I've numbered the images, is not matching the alt text numbers that we created. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have to redo the code to first see that the appropriate alt text is associated with the appropriate image. So you can see here on this page that like slider set 3.4 JPEG is pulling up the alt text of 4.3. Slider set 3.3 is pulling up alt 3.3. And slider set 3.2 is pulling up alt text 2.3. So we got to get an idea of where we're going wrong with how we're associating our images to our alt text. So what we're going to do is jiggle that around to make sure that it's correct. And the other thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of download our sliders images down to our desktop just so it's easier to look at our images and see which images are in a set so that we can write the correct alt text for it. So we realized our numbering was wrong. We were numbering it across 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4. But what we really want to do is number it down. So it's the first image in each set is the first one that's displayed, and then the second image is the second. So you could see how if you look up at the images 1, it goes slider set 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1. And so we need to do the same thing with our alt text. It needs to be alt text 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1 instead of the way we had it. And we also have to add a fifth alt text because actually each variable has actually 5 possible values. And so before we only had 4, so we were doing that wrong. So we're going to change that out and make sure now everything is numbered appropriately to follow the same way the images and the links are also numbered. And again, we clear our cache and then we reload the page. And now when we look at the code and inspect it and look at our slider items, we can now see that slider set 2.3 JPEG is matched to alt text 2.3. And same with the 2.4. So now it matches. So now we know where to put the text for that image in our code. So now all we need to do is figure out which image is in which spot so that we can put the right text there. So we are seeing, for instance, that image 2.2, for example, is the Janis Joplin stamp. So we would want the alt text that describes that stamp. for that image, and image 2.3 is an exhibition, American Stories, American Stamps. So this helps guide us to put the correct alternative text with the correct image. And so once we kind of look at everything, make sure everything is matched properly, we can go back to our code to start adding the actual alternative text. So here we're going to pull up a window that has all our images so that we can easily look at what image we're working with. So slider set 1.1 is the hide and seek catalog, the cover. So we can go ahead and add the appropriate alt text to the correct position in our code. So slider 1.2. Realize we put it again in the wrong place as we originally did, so we're going to have to go back and change that for these next ones. So we actually want to put total eclipse of the sun's sheet of stamps as our alternative text in the alt2 variable in the first position. So we're going to have to change what we're doing because we made a mistake. So we're going to go ahead and just cut and paste to move everything into the correct position as it should be. And then the correct information after hide and seek is actually an interior spread from the book Yoga, the Art of Transformation, the catalog for the Fierce Sackler Gallery. And then here we have the Janis Joplin stamp. And the American Stamps exhibition panel. And we have an object page for African apparel from, and I actually have to go back through the code to remember where this project was from, and it's the Cornell Fine Arts Museum. So we'll go ahead and fix that. So we'll continue along in this way, adding the alt text for our images until we get to the point where we filled all of the alternative text labels for our images. Now, we could probably write better alternative text, and that's something that I will go ahead and discuss with the client, because as you know, while this is saying what the object is, we could be a little bit more descriptive in our alternative text, so it's really clear to the user who is unable to visually see the image what's there. So just by saying we have a cover from a particular book, it's not really going to tell them what it looks like. And that's kind of what alt text should do. So, I'm putting this here as a placeholder for now. And then I will go back with the client to discuss how they really want to have the alternative text written out, because it is an art to write alternative text in its own way. You have special copywriters that do this type of thing, that are able to write better descriptive text when looking at an image, so that it's much clearer to someone who might be blind or have low vision to be able to understand what the image has. And especially for museums, where they're describing a piece of artwork, you do want to be careful and make sure you make a good description of what the user would be seeing. So what we want to do here is mainly get the code fixed and make sure that we have the place to put the alternative text where it's going to work for our site. So once we have all of our code in, we're going to go back and do a test to make sure, again, that the right image has the right alternative text. So here we have that the yoga image does have the right text. We see that the Cornell Fine Arts Museum is incorrectly. And we have the American Stories American Stamps exhibition panel is named appropriately, and the Janis Joplin stamp is named appropriately. So we'll look at just one other, slider set for demonstration here to see that everything is correct. But I will go through and look at all the slider sets after doing this demonstration. Just make sure every image has the right alt text. But just for demonstration purposes, we'll go through 2 of the sets so that you could at least see what's going on. So we see that Jean-Antoine Houdon, the image is properly connected to the right image. The cover of the hide and seek catalog is also connected to the right image, and the stamp sheet for the total eclipse of the sun stamps is correct. And Judy Chicago, the cover for Scala Books, is also attached to the correct image. So this is how you would go about to fix the code for the alternative text for the owl slider. It does involve going beyond what we normally talk about, which is HTML and CSS, and understanding JavaScript and how to adjust JavaScript. So this was not actually the JavaScript that came with the owl carousel. I had actually modified it to add this feature of randomization so that that we could present different sets of slides depending on when you load, it's randomized to when you load the site. So that way our clients can see different sets of images when they come to the site. And then the final thing we want to do with the owl code is see what we can do about improving the labeling of the previous and next buttons on our slider. And so we have to go back to our JavaScript code for the owl slider and our CSS to see. I know that I had inputted a different image to load than what had come with the slider, and we want to make sure that there's nothing that we can do there to make this better. And so it doesn't seem like the CSS is the place to be, so we're going to go back to our JavaScript. And we do actually find where the next and previous buttons are added. And it actually looks like there is alternative text being added. There is an ARIA label attached to a span that is added after the button element. And this may be why it isn't picked up, that it, rather than the ARIA label being added directly to the button element, it is added to a span that is added after the button element, and perhaps that's why it doesn't get picked up, but it is there. And looking at this JavaScript, I'm not sure that there's a way to adjust it differently to make it work better. but it is present, so that's good. So we know that this was considered when the OWL slider was developed. So what's left to do at this point is we're going to go back to our Web Access Pro and reanalyze the site and see what is left to edit. And if there's more items that we need to take care of, we will do that. But we have basically done a majority of the things that were flagged. Presented by Designers Learn Code.